So welcome to you all and welcome to this second session of COMCO's annual 2020 conference session on matters of representation. Unfortunately, we have a slight change in the program as Bruno de Korte had to cancel his presentation for today due to COVID. There were some changes in at his school where he's teaching. So he has had to reorganize some things. These are all things that, of course, we are dealing with at the moment in these strange times. For those who were not there this morning, our conference was actually planned in Kazan together with ICOM Russia, but due to the international situation with COVID, we had to cancel that and transfer everything to online. I'm very happy with all the work that everybody has been doing and the availability of all the speakers that have been able to fill our program. And so now it's time for our second session, Matters of Representation. So this morning we already discussed the effects of the social changes to how we do our work in the museums and how that affect our practice of collecting, but also how we look at our collections that are already there. And in this session, we will actually go a little bit deeper along some different lines in that. Critical reflections on how collections have been created and how objects have been presented and represented have taught us to revisit our praxis. So how can institutions today collect, present, interpret and share the variety of meanings that these objects bear today for the future in a respectful and inclusive manner? So I would like to start with a presentation of Nara Calvao. She's a PhD student in anthropology at the Federal University of Pernambuco. And furthermore, she's the general coordinator of the Ricardo Brenner Institute. And she will present on the ethnography of difference, gender, morality, and censorship in the museums. Nara, can I give the floor to you?
Thank you, Daniela. I would like to say hello to everybody. Can you hear me well? Is that okay?
Yes, sounds good.
Yes, nowadays we have to ask so everything can get good. So I have to say good morning for people that are the same side of me in Brazil. Maybe good afternoon for the people in the middle of the world, Europe, Africa, and good night for our colleagues from Japan and everybody that's heard us now. So I will try to do my best with this presentation with my English. And as Danielle said, I'm an anthropology PhD student and at the Federal University of Pernambuco, the state which I live. And today I will discuss some of my research and exchange some ideas and reflections with all of you. So I would like to discuss a very important theme that is about censorship in the museums. Especially now, it's important because more than ever, here in Brazil, the leaders in Brasilia, our capital, the politicians, just announced that museums will be required to pay 5,000 reais of fine if it displays nudity or criticizes religious symbols at the museums. So today I bring a few ideas to discuss what's morality about and how representation of things, especially on the nude and about nude and human, are built in our mind through the objects over time. So I'd like to share my presentation now. So, is it okay, Pedro? Okay, so just a second. Oh. Okay, so there we go. Ethnography of the difference, gender and morality in the exhibitions of the d'Orsay Museum, the Museum of Modern Art of São Paulo, and the Queer Museum exhibition in Porto Alegre. So it's a very pleasure for me to be here with the Concall again. It's my third time, so let's see it. Bring your children to see the nude in the museum was the slogan of a successful advertising campaign used by the d'Orsay Museum in 2015 and again in 2017. On buses and at subway stations all over Paris, the museum was inviting the public and their children to see their exhibitions, which contained representations of the nude in their collection of works. As I mentioned, the French campaign returned in 2017, and at the same time of that in Brazil, there were two exhibitions happening, one at the Museum of Modern Art in São Paulo, and another one in Porto Alegre at the Santander Cultural called the Queer Museum. The Museum of Modern Art was showing La Bête, performed by the artist Wagner Schwartz, inspired by the work Bicho made by the famous artist Lygia Clark. This performance was the center of controversy because a little child of 5 years old, she touched the nude performer during the show. At the same time, at the Santander Cultural, the exhibition Queer Museum, Cartographies of the Difference in Brazilian Art, curated by Gaudêncio Fidelis, was censored. 1 year later, this exhibition opened at the Parque Lage in Rio de Janeiro through a kind of crowdfunding or collective fund support that raised more than 1 million reais. And it was only possible to reopen the exhibition because of the participation of the public. And we had a record number of visitors, about 10,000 visitors came to see this work. What can be said about the relationship between the campaign of the French Museum, the MAN exhibition in São Paulo, and the Queer Museum in Porto Alegre, and the question of morality? What changed in the French and Brazilian context? Do we need to be taught how to see nudity? Is nudity really the central issues of these exhibitions, or are there political foundation in the judgment of this criticism? What are the cultural aspects that contribute to the formation, education, the museum's goers' points of view? As the art is political at all the time, and as in a political context, Brazil is going through a time of turbulence. How can this moral confrontation and this spectacularization of morality from an exhibition be a tool of reflection? This research, in fact, highlights two fundamental aspects of culture that concerns the production of images and the positions this image takes. As Didi Huberman would say, these images are artistic make itself, take individual and collective impacts on the social. In this regard, we can highlight the positions of contestation against some social codes in the middle of 21st century. That these images or collection of them when forming an exhibition provoke, which brings relevant aspects from point of view of gender, politics, and morality. So I can show you the advertisement in Paris. Okay, inviting the children to go to the museums to see the nude. And here's the performance at the MAN in São Paulo at the middle, okay, with Wagner Schwartz. And people had to talk his body because the artist, Lygia Clark, had the workpiece that people were supposed to touch it. So he tried to do a kind of similar thing. And on the right side, we have one painting at the Porto Alegre exhibition that goes, make some reflections about some religion symbols. So it was censored because of that. So these were some what was in the Instagram at the d'Orsay Museum, and people saying that I was proud to be French because of that, of the advertisement. So do we need to be touched how to see nude is a question. And in the field of art, what means a body and what's its power? What's the power of a body in the field of art? So the ethnography, the Museum of Art, the Modern Art in São Paulo performance were performed by if it was performed by a female artist, would the female nude have triggered the same strangeness and controversy? And if that same performance had been performed in Paris, would there be any criticism from the French public? What makes an advertised campaign a success by inviting parents to take their children to see the nude at the d'Orsay Museum? And what kind of nudity is accepted by the public in the field of the arts? The ethnography of these exhibitions brings three epistemological approaches that concern the representations of the female nude in art, the challenge of morality in art, and the retrogression of artistic making from a conservative wave that's established in Brazil. The three exhibitions raise many debates, but the first question, which becomes useful in an anthropological context, is to know the dimension of what can a body in the field of art, and how can the representation of this naked body change in art history if related to gender. So without the body, which gives in a face, the humans would be existing, living consistence of continually reducing the world, just a second, to its body based on the symbolic it embodies. Humans' existence is corporeal, and the social and cultural treatment of which the body is an object, the image that exposes its hidden sickness, the values that distinguish it, also speak to us about the person and the variation that his definition and ways of existence know of a structure the other. David Lebetron. In the three cases that I mentioned here, it's possible to identify a common aspect, the subjective of the body image in art. What is the invisible and inexplicable strengths of the representation of the body in art, and what is its social, cultural, and political function? The objective of this research is to problematize art and its form of representation, seeking to understand from an ethnography of these collections and exhibitions, the art transformation involving representations of gender and sexuality. The d'Orsay Museum is located in the heart of Paris, on the banks of the river Sena, and houses the largest collections of Impressionist and Post-Impressionist painting. Its museum has the emblematic work, The Origin of the World by Gustave Colbert. This painting will serve as the guide thread of the research because it represents an icon in art history. The work depicts a nude woman with a focus on sex and her womb, which at the time shocked the 19th century French society. It was not until the 20th century that the d'Orsay Museum exhibited the painting. In this regard, I would like to highlight how the representations of the nude family in art contribute to the way in which the female role in society were defined. In the 19th century, female nudity functioned as a way to control and determine woman's sexuality and behavior. So, the emergence of a pictorial gainers such as the nude female constituted an act of regulation whose aim was to contain and regulate the woman's sexualized body. These works linked ideas of sensuality, fluidity, and passivity. Did the representation of human in art corroborate a female image of passivity and submission to the masculine gaze? Another, so this, I will show some images of the representation of the body of a woman since the past until now, like only a few. So the Sheila Nagui, the Born of Venus, the Mona Lisa, and this is really an icon because it changed the way people see the body of a woman. So it's a very important painting for me to investigate because of that. Another important work that provoked French society in the 19th century was the Edouard Monet's painting, Olympia. This was one of the first representation of a prostitute in the art history. In a way, through the image of the naked female body, wrapped in props, a flower in her hair, chokers the echoed libertine desires. The female body in art history has always been represented from a female perspective, although feminist movements have been working hard to self-representation free from a patriarchal view. The truth is that the literature about women, both feminist and anti-feminist, is a long reflection on the question of the nature of genesis, of oppression and subordination of the woman. What then are these relations through which a woman becomes an oppressed woman? Gail Rubin, in Sexy Policies, suggests some paths based on the theories of Levi-Strauss and Sigmund Freud. For Rubin, the works of Levi-Strauss and Freud brings conceptual tools with which is possible to describe the part of social life in which the oppression of women, sexual minorities, and certain aspects of the human personality presents an individual resides. The author calls this part of social lives the sex-gender system, which consists of a series of arrangements through which a society transforms biological sexuality into products of human activities. So my very deep intention is to investigate or point ways that answer questions as how gender is experienced and structured by culture, and how do these icon works of art historiograph imprison the female body in a perspective, and how does feminism and anthropology contributes to producing a new representation of the female body in art history? Would art be a medium used as a discourse of resistance? Returning to the successful campaign of the d'Orsay Museum, how does the slogan, "Bring your children to see the nude in the museum," contribute to break or to legitimize the gender paradigms present in the works? In an interview, the director of the communication department of the d'Orsay Museum, Amélie Randerviller, stated that the central idea was to attract children to the museum and how to relate the works of the collection to current themes related to sexuality and gender. For example, around the painting, The Origin of the Word from Colbert, she comments, there is a relationship with nudity that leads to the debate, especially this work, which is so sensitive. But this is also the function of art, said her. The art has to disturb, has to question, has to make reflections. The advertising campaign took place in the same period in which two exhibitions, as I read told, in Brazil, suffered censorship. In the case of the Museum of Art Modern in São Paulo, Wagner Schwartz's performance provoked a real war of narratives unleashed on social networks and later at the door of the Museum of Modern Art. So this is the exhibition again, and people protesting against and telling the people that this was pedophilia. And here's a link I can't open now, but I think somebody is going to chat, in the chat is going to put the link so everybody can go after. It's in Portuguese, but only to see like how people were so mean and telling like the museum was responsible for that. And yeah.
2 minutes, Nara.
Okay, I'm just finishing. So the advertising campaign, oh, I'm sorry. The exhibition Queer Museum, Cartography of the Difference, also caused controversy and debates about freedom of expression, mainly because they hurt religion saints. Okay, so I just forgot to tell about this image, okay? At the same time, at the museum, the little girl, she's from a middle class, and we have many debates here, but she was at the museum, she's a white girl, and she touched this body, and everybody goes to the internet and said like it was pedophilia and things like that. At the same time, in Brazil, in a prison, was found a little boy in the prison with an adult that was sexually abused, and nobody cared about that in the internet. So what kind of morality are we talking about? That's the question. So we have a curator here in Pernambuco, Moacir dos Anjos, a very good curator, and he did a very good article. Here's the link as well. And he said, the performance did not demand interaction with children. It did not need require interaction with anyone. The interaction exists as a possibility, as a bet. So he also discussed a little bit about this kind of morality and what is it about. So about the Queer Museum, the exhibition went through two censorship. The first one was in Porto Alegre, and after the mayor in Rio de Janeiro said no to this exhibition, we had the Crow Foundation and all the crowdfunding and the collective people sponsored the exhibition at Parque Lages. So it was amazing that could happen. And there were some of the people saying, yes, this is an exhibition when they open. And somebody said, I think this exhibition is beautiful, wonderful. Another person said, my contribution was really a protest. I feel like I'm a part of this exhibition. And the curator, Caldencio Fidelis, he said, I think that society realized that democracy, the right to access to art, to culture is not something permanent, and that it was necessary to fight for this right to be guaranteed. So, just to finish, Roberto Cardoso de Oliveira is an anthropologist in Brazil, and in his article, Anthropology and Morality, he states that the topic of morality is frequently dealt with the scope of philosophy. Only very recently that it has been approached by anthropologists. According to him, the most complex of this field of research is the question of value, or more precisely, the judgment of value can be a problem for anthropologists who are trained not to incarnate and act. A question that is present and very difficult is how to study the act of a person or a group of people when their action reflect culture and some specific values that are right things for them. How to deal with this. And the second question is, how are these values built as society? Thus, addressing issues of morality or the judgment of values in the field of anthropological knowledge is urgent and necessary because it's a matter of everyday life, of contemporary. I started from a theoretical premise. I believe that museums are good for thinking and also for acting, reflecting the structural contradiction of societies and social groups. I believe that museums are stages where individuals from different nationalities, social, gender, class, identities are built and expressed. Museums also have been used as important political instruments, highlighting the intrinsic relationship between memory and power. There is an urgent need to rethink museums at present and reflect about a museology different from what we have received from the traditional museology and its representation. So would it be naive to think that all of this is just conservatism and morality? Maybe. What the thin line between a political project to combat the Brazilian democratic states that begins with the field of arts and education and all the questions about morality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nara. There's a lot of things to think about. But before we go to questions, I would like now to invite Lilia Satarova to proceed with her presentation. Lilia Satarova is Deputy Director General and Curator-in-Chief of the National Museum of the Republic of Tatarstan in Kazan, Russia. She will present on collecting Tata cultural heritage, past, present, and future.
Thank you very much. Good evening for all the participants of our group of other seminar. And I'm very, you can hear me? I'm very happy to participate this seminar, and I'll talk about collecting Tatar cultural heritage and try to accompany this talk with some presentation.
There we go.
Sorry.
Do you see it? Is it working?
Yes.
Yes.
You can see, but I cannot see.
You cannot see?
No. I cannot see.
Okay, maybe you just start talking, Lilia.
Yeah.
And then we just along the lines we will swap over slides as a visual.
Yes. So the National Museum in the Republic of Tatarstan possess extensive collections which preserve both the tangible and intangible cultural heritage of the Tatar people. In the Republic of Tatarstan, 2020 is the year of celebrating the centenary of its creation as republic soon after Bolshevik Revolution. This anniversary has led to an increased interest in museum collections on the part of publishers and researchers. Many books and monographs, temporary and permanent exhibitions based on our collections have been prepared. On the other hand, the centenary of the Republic gave rise to museums to revise their own collections, as well as the collecting policy. This primarily affected the Tatar collections.
Lilia, can you maybe, because the sound is really soft, so maybe get a little bit closer to the mic. Or put up your voice a little bit louder, because...
You cannot hear me, yes. And on the other hand, the centenary of the Republic gave rise to museums to revise their own collection as well as the collecting policy. This primarily affected the Tatar collections, the history of which has not yet become the subject of research. Therefore, the idea arose of a brief overview of the stages of collecting the Tatar heritage in Tatarstan. The foundations for the formation of those collections were laid down in the second half of the 19th century with the efforts of the members of the Society for Archaeology, History and Ethnography of Kazan University. The main motivation to acquire items of Tatar culture at the stage was the interest of the enlightened part of the Russian society in the life and culture of the indigenous people of the Volga region. In this regard, the objects of Tatar ethnography, which were collected by the scholars of Kazan University, along with the ethnography of Udmurts, Chuvash, Mari, and other peoples of the region, constitute a very small part of these collections. Moreover, these collections always was remained inaccessible to the public. Furthermore, under the influence of the university, private collecting developed in Kazan. From the point of view of collecting the Tatar heritage, first of all, the collection of scholar Andrei Likhachev should be noted. His collection consisted of more than 40,000 items, including the world's best items of Volga-Bulgar antiquities, archaeological artifacts, an extensive numismatic collection, paintings, engravings, objects of Oriental art, as well as fine examples of traditional clothes of the peoples of Volga area. The collection was donated to the city of Kazan to create a museum of the city, which was opened in 1895. The objects of the Likhachev's collection related to the culture and life of the Tatars formed the basis of the Tatar collections in the contemporary museum and now evaluated. During this period, among the Tatar intellectuals, an understanding of the need for a museum of the Tatar heritage was gradually emerging. At the beginning of the 20th century, Tatar intellectuals have repeatedly raised the matter of the formation of national museum, which will become imperative for the time. So in 1913, a Kazan city council member, Apanayev, one of the Tatar merchants, initiated the creation of the Tatar Museum. During this period, the first private Tatar collections were spontaneously formed among famous Tatar intellectuals as Shikabutin Marjani and Galimjan Barudi. However, these collections do not have time to become available or to obtain any status. The Bolshevik Revolution of 1917 and the followed social transformations excluded any possibility to private collecting. The class of rich people who could do it was totally disappeared. The establishment of the Tatar Republic in 1920 played a decisive role in the formation of the Tatar collections. The first museum of the newly founded republic was the Museum of the Orient. This museum existed only 2 years, 1920, 1929, and it's the make Tatar cultural heritage the part of museum was the main goal of its activities. So the Tatar cultural heritage was collected and treated as inseparable from the historical processes affected on the peoples of Eurasia. The Central Scientific Muslim Collegium, in which a special commission was formed with the participation of prominent university members and employees of the Central Museum of Tatar Republic, played an important role in organizing the Oriental Museum. The commission brought together both teachers of Kazan University and, for the first time in the history, the Tatar specialists, ethnographers, Orientalists, experts in Oriental languages, with classical Muslim education, such as Gayas Kubaydullin, Kalimjan Sharaf, and Ahmed Hadi Maksudi. The commission appealed to local collectors and society to participate in organizing the museum. The museum inventory has only 137 records. They include more than 100 names of people donated to museum, various artifacts. Many items came from famous families of Tatar merchants. As a result of the commission's work, the exhibition of Oriental culture was opened in Kazan on September 28, 1920, and this exhibition acted during 4 months. The creation of the museum facilitated a diversification of the collecting themes, which now included not only ethnographical objects, but also written sources and literary monuments that reflect the stages of Tatar written and narrative legacy, changing alphabet from Arabic script to Latin and Cyrillic. One of the most important collection of Tatar jewelry belonged to French painter Léon Sicler, who used to live in Kazan. and in 1919 he sold his collection to Moscow State Commission to Antiquities, but Tatar government decided to return from Moscow, to return this collection from Moscow for the Kazan Oriental Museum. At the same time, the Soviet government sent the exhibitions to collect ethnography. The ethnographic pieces came from the field studies of Professor Nikolai Vorobyov and Professor Kudursky in 1923 and in 1925. These collections were intended to be exhibited at the All Union Agricultural Exhibition and the Paris World Exhibition. As a result, the Central Museum of the Tata Republic acquired remarkable examples of jewelry, traditional clothing, household items of the Kazan Tatars who lived in the villages in the region over Kazan city. The huge photographic archive of Vorobjov's expeditions, which recorded the traditional dwellings of Tatars, the arrangement of estates and buildings, household utensils and agricultural tools, villagers in traditional clothes, belongs to the same time. Changes in the internal policy of Bolshevik Russia influenced to the ideas of content of the Oriental Museum. The principle of a broad approach to collecting heritage, which is the basis of the Oriental Museum, did not find the continuation in the public museum policy in 1920s. Immediately, all items written in Arabic script became out of fashion. Some tendencies in collecting of the Tatar heritage during period between 1930s, 1980s should be mentioned. In the years after the Second World War, the museum began collecting archives of Tatar writers who died on the battles. In 1944, it was decided to open the Sharif Kamal Museum in his private apartment. He was a famous Tatar writer. And the museum began to collect documents and personal belongings from the families of writers who died during the war, such as Fatih Karim, Adel Kutu. These names are common for every Tatar. And at the same time, the literary department of our museum was organized. The further acquisition of the collection of Tatar literature strengthened the position of the Museum for Local History, which was the State Museum of the Tatar Republic, nowadays the National Museum of the Republic of Tatarstan. In spite of some restrictions and limitations, museum continued to collect records in Arabic script. For instance, in 1941, the museum received the album previously held by Professor Pokrovsky of more than 70 lithography with religious text and images, the so-called Shamail, issued by Kazan publishing houses at the end of the 19th, the early 20th centuries. This album, which added to the collection of Tatar printed graphics, has become a unique source on the history of lithograph art and calligraphy, and at the same time visual tradition, graphic tradition of the Tatars. Up to the 90s of the 20th century, the State Museum of the Republic of Tatarstan was only state institution that could acquire personal archives. Thanks to this, the museum acquired very valuable personal archives and collections of Tatar poets, writers, and artists, and actors and researchers of literature of the 19th and 20th centuries. Since then, many academic publications on the classics of Tatar literature have been compiled on the materials of our archives. one of the most important donations was the library and archive of Zainab Maksudova, which made a significant contribution to the study and preservation of the Tatar written legacy. So today, the National Museum of the Republic of Tatarstan possesses entire personal collections of Tatar culture figures. The museum considers this collection of the Tata intellectuals' materials as a necessary documenting of a huge cultural layer and of the prominent cultural process, an inseparable part of the richest cultural heritage of the Tata people. It is worth mentioning that these extensive collections made it possible to create, among other things, memorial museums of prominent Tata writers and poets, such as Gabdullah Tokay Literary Museum, the Museum of Musa Jalil, the hero and the poet, or the poet and the hero of the Second World War, composers Salih Saidashov, Nasib Shiganov, as well as the Museum of Tatar Literature with the memorial department of the writer Sharif Kamal, which will be the theme of the second, of the next presentation from our museum. And I finish my presentation with some slides with the views of the newly created, opened exhibition. If you can see my presentation, because I cannot see it. The file.
We now see some images with some exhibition setups.
Yes, this is the newly opened exhibition, the large exhibition of our museum that presents the history of Tatarstan from the ancient times to nowadays, to modernity, and the Tatar cultural heritage took its place, its prominent place, its remarkable place in this exhibition. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Lilia, and also thank you doing this under these circumstances. Technique is always a bit of a challenge. I would like to invite Leen Beijers and Nara back to when we would have a conference on stage, I would say back to the stage. It was interesting to have the different angles, and I invited Leen Beijers from the Mas Museum as well, because as said, Bruno de Korte was unfortunately unable to come. And he was going to present a little bit about the Africa Museum in Brussels, talking about decolonization. And actually, the different aspects that we had put together in this session actually all relate to the changes in society on different levels that make us look different at the collections that we have. And how we relate to that. Nara had a talk about morality and how we change the way of looking at nudity changes depending also on where we are in the world. And you, Lilia, with the changes when nation states or borders are changing and national stories therefore are also changing. And the fact on the Africa Museum, the whole decolonization, where when we look at the changing societies or where we're living in, and how representation is done from the colonial pasts, and how these collections have come to be, we also see that we have different ideas and concepts about that today. But it's not always an easy task to then make the move together with the demand from society. How are we reinventing and revisiting these collections, and what can we do with that? Lane, can I maybe just briefly ask you to shortly reflect on, because I know also at the Mas Museum, you've also been revisiting decolonization concepts and maybe in the broader concept of Belgium and maybe linking a little bit to the African Museum. Can you bring a little bit of your insights to the table as well?
Well, it's an important year because we have to remember the 60 years of the end of the colonization of Congo this year in Belgium. And together with the Black Lives Matter movement, this, let's say it's not an anniversary, but it's an important year, creates an intense debate. And for the first time since, let's say, a decade ago, also on the political level, because on a commission in the parliament has started up now to sort of prepare a new policy vis-à-vis decolonization and vis-à-vis Congo, and to a part of this new policy would also be to look at the museums and their collections. And the two big museums which have collections from this former colony, Congo, in Belgium are the African Museum, which is close to Brussels, and which has been renewed and reopened 2 years ago. And the Mas Museum, where I work, it's in Antwerp, port city. And in our museum, the collection is very much linked to the economic colonization and the history of the port. And in our museum, we are, let's say, more at the margins of the national debate because our collection is smaller. But we will open an exhibition which invites people to reflect on our Africa collection on 2 October. And we think that this will also heighten or increase the debate on restitution and on decolonization of the museums and of our museum. And what we at least try to do in this exhibition is we have 2 curators, Nadia Nassai and Else Palmenaar, and they collaborate. And it's interdisciplinary since Nadia is a political scientist. Her origins are partly in Congo, and Else is an art historian. And so this, the fact of having a more diverse team for this collection since more than a year now is really important. And luckily, we can continue to collaborate with Nadia as curator for other projects as well, because for a long time, of course, we had, of course, networks in society, but not a position of power in the museum itself. So they have curated this exhibition, which will open soon. And they show 100 pieces of the Africa collection, and they tell very much a lot about the provenance. They've done research on that, and there is a big space in the exhibition, and this film will also be online, in which 15 people have shared a contemporary view on objects. And I have been lucky to see this film already, and I think the film itself will tackles a lot of the debate about violence, about colonial past, about how to deal with restitution today. So that's what's happening in the mass at this moment, really at the margins of the national debate, because much more in the national and international debate, also with the commission from UNESCO, is this big Africa museum. And within the museum, I think since 2 years, not so much at the opening, which was quite a bit a stiff opening, I think, but since these 2 years, a lot of things have been moving also within this museum. And so we debate with them, and together, in fact, we also have to work together to in fact, talk with the political world about restitution, or to at least update each other about what's also happening in Congo and with museums in Congo today. Yeah, that's a bit the scene for the moment, Belgium, an important year.
Well, thank you so much to add this context to this session, because I think it fits in really well. We go very fast through time. So I would actually ask Lilia and Nara one last question, and maybe I can ask, because at the moment I don't see any special questions in the Q&A. If the people that are listening from their various spaces and places in the world have questions for the speakers, please do email it to comcol.secretary@gmail.com, and we will make sure that the questions are forwarded to these speakers. So Nara and Lilia, so Len was saying how they try to include communities in this process as well to get the different perspectives. And Nara, with respect to what you were talking about, it was clear, evident, there were protests pro and against nudity. So how is there a way that we can bring these two groups together instead of just bagatellizing one of the groups and saying, so you're anti and you're for censorship, I'm not talking to you, but how can we include them as well? If we want to be inclusive, those voices should also be heard. Do you have any idea how that could be done? I know it's very difficult, but I think it's a challenge that we should put ourselves in as well. Nara, your sound is not. No. So maybe you just unmute it again, and then I first go to Lilia, and maybe she can reflect on it, and then we come back to you, Nara. So for you, there's also been a lot of changes, and you've been also changing in how you collect. Can you tell a little bit more in how you include different voices in your representation of the museum nowadays, Lilia?
Our museum is the Museum of Local History, and our exhibition is huge and very it represents various materials, documents, it represents history of the region, of peoples, of our society, of our republic. So how we made the society inclusive. Our society is various groups of our of society are very interested in these materials. We organize visiting groups in our museums, and master classes and various quests they are very fashionable now. At the time, I see they became very traditional now, and I don't think they are very original forms of inclusion, um, but really our museum is one of the most visited museums in our republic, because the entire theme of the representation and very rich materials we are presenting in the exhibition.
And the very local focus makes it also
yes,
very appealing to a lot.
Especially not only locals, the locals naturally, locals are the main group, but the tourists, because the visitors of Tatarstan and Kazan want to want to learn much about Tatars, about this region. The Tatarstan is very popular region in Russia. It's the region of prosperity, the region of many activities, the sport activities, the cultural activities, festivals, etc., etc. And the tourists necessary. We are in the program of must seen, must visited, and must seen in Tatarstan.
Oh, very good. Well, thank you so much, Lilianara. We try just one more, and then we have to see if it works. If you can just briefly, briefly reflect, and then we have to go out to get ready for the next session, because it's a full day.
Okay, I think it's a great question that you just asked me. And what I think is that museums are a very great instrument for doing that, for putting everybody, all the society, whoever is against, whoever is, who agree with these exhibitions. And I think the museums, they have to stimulate the debates through the research and the educational departments that they have. So that's so important that they have educational programs at the museums for that. So I think we can do that. And also for my research, especially, I'm trying to do all my best to be kind of a little neutral and to hear the both sides. Yeah, to make conclusions after, because everybody makes part of a society, so we have to listen after.
Yeah,
sure. So
yeah, it's very important. Yeah. Well, ladies, I would like to thank you for your amazing presentations, and even through all the technical difficulties, I think we had a great session here. And thank you for the people that joined us now. As said, if you have questions for any of the speakers, email comcol.secretary@gmail.com, and we will make sure that the questions are forwarded to these wonderful speakers. And in less than half an hour, the next session will start. I'll quickly have a peek. That is actually with Lane as moderator. We will have we have a session which is called What Tells the Collection? So how the collectors that bring the collection together, what stories are they telling? And one on ethics of collecting. And don't forget, tonight we have a mingling session, and Christiana, one of our young board members who was also giving the technical support today, said, please tell the people it is a kind of speed dating way of meeting the people in the field. So we are trying to create a little bit of the sense and the sphere of having a physical conference together by doing it online. So I hope you join us again for the next session, and thank you again for now.
Thank you, and hope Hope see you in Kazan.
Me too.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye bye.